What's going on YouTube? It's your boy John Gomez, aka BBCJG, coming at you today with our top 16 deck profile we had yesterday at the North American TAC Regionals for Digimon. We got 15th out of 488 players playing red, black, yellow security control. The deck's really consistent. It really rewards you for being patient, and it kind of punishes your opponent for trying to play the game. We've had a pretty rough set of regionals back to back, where we kind of just had unfortunate draws, or my opponent's security was just better than mine, or my security was just bad in general, and you can't really play the game, which happens in Digimon. There's variance involved. Obviously, that happens with security control too. It just happens a lot less. And the biggest thing that I really wanted to do yesterday, because I'm very tired from playing all of these regionals back to back every week. So the thing I really wanted to do with this deck was make my opponent play where I didn't have to. A lot of security controls plays while thinking. A lot of thought is involved in the way you do them. A lot of your plays are very linear, and you only make one play a turn on average. So you really have not too much to worry about as far as lines of play and the amount of time you take putting on the clock. You just have to be mindful that your opponent's going to take a while to make their lines of plays, so you have to keep them being honest and reasonable with the time management and making sure that they are attempting to finish the game in a reasonable amount of time. But your goal is to be able to win game 1 and then play the game as long as you can for game 2. Realistically, you can win the match. I did win in game 3 multiple times yesterday, so it is not the long dragged out game that your opponent thinks it has to be because you're playing security control. Your opponent's the one that really takes the amount of time playing the game because they have to figure out how they beat you and the risk that they need to take. So I think security control is a really safe bet for anyone who at least has an understanding of the game and the meta, to know what you care about and what you don't care about. The choking points and the amount of time that you can have to set up your situation before your opponent can figure out how to deal with it themselves, and just having faith in your security. So yeah, without further ado, we have our top 16 deck profile. Hope you like it. So on to the deck profile. We'll start with our egg. We have a Koromon egg. This egg does not matter, it just needs to be red, so it can be any red baby you want. I just happen to have this promo Koromon off to the side and figured might as well use it because I'm not going to play in anything else because I only have one. So we're playing our one red egg, which is our Koromon promo, but that can realistically be any red egg you'd like. And now for starting with the enablers, we have Magna Angemon. We're playing 4 of that. Magna Angemon on play, recover 1. Basically the bread and butter security control decks. If you almost always want to have this in your opening hand or in your first 2 or 3 draws. Starting at 6 security is a good place to be at when you're playing with this deck. So we play 3 Magna Angemons. To go with the Magna Angemons, we have 2 Mistymons. These are also just yellow level 5s. On play, they can give minus 3000 BP to 2 different targets. So unlike Chaos Valor Arm, he can't target the same thing twice or else he'd be actual busted. But it comes up. You occasionally kill things, and what's more important is that you have additional bodies that you can digivolve into your Seraphimon. Seraphimon, 3 to digivolve. On Digivolution, recover 1. And then it has security attack +1 as long as you have 3 or more security? Yeah, well, you have 3 or more security. So he attacks pretty heavily. Nice. It's one of your good attackers in this deck. You don't really care if it dies. It kind of just gets some checks in, which helps work later on. But the main thing is that you get an additional recovery out of your Magna Angemon, and even your Mistymon can start doing some recovery, which is really the important part there. To go along with that, we have 4 Bangermons. Again, pretty standard. The whole point about security control is that you want to stay as high a security as you can for as long as you can. Your opponent has to play this long game where they have to draw a bunch of cards to try to beat you. So you're slowly grinding them out of cards and resources, and Magnagimon being your recovery 2 for free on play helps you do that. And then to go with the Magnagimon, we play 3 copies of Lucimon. Lucimon on play recover 1, so it's just another Magnagimon. It's 13 to play, but it gets reduced by 8 if you have 10 cards in your trash, which is pretty easy to do if your opponent's just playing the game normally. So this card usually costs 5 on a good day to hard play out of your hand. With Magnagimon, when you attack, you can play Lucimon for free because it is a level 3. And honestly, yesterday I ended up playing it just hard casting, putting my opponents to 10 a bunch just to recover 1. And sometimes you just get there, so Lucimon is a great inclusion. I probably wouldn't cut any, but I can see going down to 2 copies. I can see going up to 4 copies and playing Bushy and then replacing the red egg. But that's kind of preference style with security control. Our other creatures, we play 4 copies of Machinegimon. This was a flex choice. The main reason I played it is that I wanted to be able to digivolve into Zwart defeats if I drew them. Just to give like potential added bonuses to Zwart defeats. I could pop Tamers, which is relevant. I popped a couple TKs yesterday. I popped a Mat Tie to prevent my opponent from getting 7 or 5 memory instead of 3. So that's pretty clutch. But yeah, just being able to evolve into Zwart defeat. I did have a really cool play come up. We'll talk about it later on. But it was against green deck. Really cool, very situational, but it was super cool. And then the last for the creatures, we have the 4 copies of the Zwart defeat. Mandatory 4 of. You want this guy in your security all the time, and even if it's not in your security, you can honestly, towards the end of the game, when your opponent only has like 1 or 2 security left and they have to deal with this guy, just put it on the table, and your opponent has to deal with it, which is going to cost them not only the card that deals with it, but then whatever the best Digimon is in play at that time. If they don't delete it before then Zwart's going to either check security for free, kill blockage for free, or attack over things for free. Zwart defeat is just by far the best reason to play this deck, so you wouldn't go down to less than 4 copies. Past the creatures, we have our Tamer package. We're playing 9 Tamers. We're playing 3 copies of TK. TK is your yellow enabler, just your thing that stays in play that lets you play your yellow option cards. The best thing TK does is once you have a nice thick recovery stack, above 5, you can play a TK, then look through that stack, and it's basically, pot of extravagance. Like, you can look through so many cards and be able to take any one card from there that you want, and then you have the added benefit that if it's yellow, you can recover 1. The biggest thing that TK does, which I think people really need to make sure that they don't, I hear people like not playing TKs anymore, but TK is really important because it lets you shuffle your security. That's really important because if you're playing against a good opponent, they're going to track what you're doing when you look at your top of your deck when you with cards like Izzy. So being able to for them to know what to play around when it's like Gaia Force or Ultimate Flare or a Zwart defeat or something like that, because your Izzy revealed, TK shuffles that all away, and then it never becomes safe again to attack. So you kind of just have to risk it, roll dice. To go into that, we're playing 3 copies of Izzy. Izzy on play lets you stack your deck, which is really good with this deck, because you can get into really interesting plays with Magnagimon, Lucimon, anything that recovers. You can stack your deck with Izzy, put that card on top. You can play mind games with your opponent where you stack things kind of not where you think they should be, and it kind of messes up. Like I had somebody yesterday, they saw my stack and it was TK, Zwart defeat, something underneath it, and I went TK on top, Zwart defeat underneath it, other thing underneath that, and my opponent was very confused. They were like, I'm pretty sure you said you put TK on top, but I'm just gonna assume that you put Zwart defeat on top. And then he attacked me, and I was like, no, I definitely put TK on top, because then TK triggers, I look at my security, and as long as I take a yellow thing, that Zwart defeat's gonna go on top next. So it's really important where you stack your deck with Izzy, but Izzy gives you the confidence in knowing that you can stack your deck and not lose something like a Digimon on top of your deck. It's what you want to avoid and what you couldn't avoid with old security control decks. So Izzy, definitely a mainstay in this deck. Even if you don't play black options, Izzy's just really good. 3 Matt Tide. This is probably the all-star of the deck and why the deck is really good right now. The whole way you beat security control usually is by creating one big threat and then a bunch of little threats to go with it. Your big threat is hopefully checking big securities and living, while your little threats are kind of chipping away here and there, ping and pong and taking little points of damage here. The thing about Matt Tai is your opponent can't have big threats in play. They can't put a counter Omni into play. They can't put a Lord Knight into play. They can't put a War Greymon into play. They can't put a Nidhogg or Grand Quagmon into play, because if those things live, and you have the tempo to choose whether they live or not, based off of your own rule, you can decide to leave their level 6s in play if you want, because if their level 6s only check 1 security, they can stay in play as long as you want, because you're going to constantly be recovering that. Matt Tai is going to give you the memory to be able to do that consistently every turn as long as that level 6 is in play. So there's a big thing we noticed yesterday is once I got 2 of these in play, it was almost always GG. My opponents just never got to play back after I had 2 Tai Mats in play. You start your turn off with 7 memory, suddenly they're getting double Transcendent sorted in a turn. They can get double Gaia Force if you have enough memory, or they can get Gaia Force put to 1, which is also crazy. Yeah, Matt Tai is insane. And now, for the namesake part of the deck, the cards that come in security that you really care about, we have 4 copies of Holy Wave. This is just recover 1, so it's essentially Fog as an attack. Super nice when your opponent's trying to chip away and they're doing things and they're attacking with their little Digimon and all this stuff, and then they get Holy Wave, the Digimons live, and it makes their ultimate flares just so much better. It also lets your things attack over things because they check the Holy Wave. So that's cool. Holy Wave, just a cool, simple recover card. Same reason you play Lucimon, same reason you play Magnangemon. 4 copies of Transcendent Sword. This is surprisingly one of the worst options in the deck. For what it does, you really want it to be like 12k DP. It's really easy to get over 11 when you're attacking. Think of like Shoutmon decks. Lord Knight decks are pretty always above 11k, so it's really easy to get above that 11k threshold. So this kind of doesn't happen a lot unless you have Zwart Defeat in play, and that doesn't happen again consistently enough for me to want to stress over it. So I can realistically see not wanting to play as many Transcendent Swords or trying to play like Eden's Javelin instead, because at least Eden's Javelin is at least drawing you a card, but Transcendent Sword is almost always going to be a better removal spell in those situations. So pick your poison type things, but Transcendent Sword, playing 4 of, but I can see playing less, I can see playing none. Kind of just depends on the week in the meta. So yeah, 4 copies of good old Gaia Force. Good old Gaia Force still doing what good old Gaia Force does, and that's deleting Digimon when they attack security and making it so your opponent can't push your game. Gaia Force only guaranteed just hard removal for anything. Can't play less than 4. 2 copies of Trident Revolver, and then 3 copies of Ultimate Flare. If I had really one thing I would want to change about the event yesterday, I would want to switch one of these Ultimate Flares for another Trident Revolver. Because Trident Revolver synergizing with putting a Tamer into play means you're taking 2 actions for 6 memory, which is really good in security control. They usually don't get a lot of opportunities to take 2 actions in a turn. So whenever you get the opportunity to take 2 actions in a turn, you probably should. So Trident Revolver being able to put one of these Tamers into play is nuts. And it instantly kills blockers for Zwart Defeat, which is what happened a bunch yesterday. I would have a Zwart in play and then they'd attacks, and then they get Trident Revolver, blow up their blocker, and then get checked for 3 securities because of Matt Tai's. Ultimate Flare saved me multiple times against Rookie Rush and Lord Knight players yesterday. But besides that, it's very situational, and even then, you kind of want it to be in security. You don't really want to be playing this card from your hand. Ultimate Flare, good, not the best. We had a funny play that happened where I had a Machine Dramon in play, or a Machine Dramon in my hand. My opponent had a Nidhoggmon and a Palmon. That on deletion, you can put any Palmon from your trash pile into the source as the bottom Digivolution. And I had an instance where my opponent attacked, got Transcendent Sword, but the only Digimon were the Palmon and the Nidhogg. So I had the Transcendent Sword, the Palmon, because Nidhogg's too big to get Transcendent Sworded. So we Transcendent Sword to Palmon. Palmon put itself under the Nidhogg after I already had no sources. And then my turn came, and I just played Machinedramon and de-Digivolved the Nidhogg. So I ended up getting rid of their Nidhoggmon and getting them back down to a Palmon and not giving a bunch of memory over because they just previously Nidhogged me. So it was actually kind of insane. Yeah, I'm super super happy with the list I chose to play. This list essentially is very safe. We kind of just covered our bases. You can totally adjust this to be more focused on your local meta. I can see a realistic world where you actually just end up cutting the red package and playing just yellow and black. There's some really good black options that can go with that stuff, and the yellow options are obviously okay. We have Eden's Javelin for sure. There's the Blade of the Truth, or Blade of the Just, that lets you draw cards. I saw that happen yesterday a bunch. But I really think this line right here should stay about the same. You can probably cut Machinedramon for other option cards. I don't really think it matters. He did come up a lot as a blocker, which kind of, shows just the power of Machinedramon still. As just an 11 clay blocker, your opponent has to answer it, so it really does buy you some amount of time. But I'm very happy with this list and how it performed for me yesterday. So that was my security control deck profile, and for those of you curious about my matchups, we played against a diverse part of the field. I think we played against 5 different decks throughout the day. We started playing against Rookie Rush, where we went 2-1 against them. We lost the game when I had basically our security never killed any of their Digimon, so that's unfortunate, but it happens. But we ended up getting a really clutch Ultimate Flare off of them game 1 or 3 to win that match, and that was huge. It cleared off. I think I deleted like 6 or 7 Digimon with that Ultimate Flare, so it was a big Ultimate Flare. Round 2 we played against Green OTK, and we unfortunately drew, and that's kind of what happens. I became mindful after that game because I think my opponent was taking a little bit of time to think about their lines of play. I think I might have been taking a little bit of time because of inexperience. But at the end of the game 3, when we got eventually had to get it to draw because of time, my opponent only had 4 cards left in their deck, and there was no way they were going to kill me through security checks because they would have needed to evolve into Grand Quagamon, which would have made them deck out. And they wouldn't have had enough secure attacks with Grand Quagamon to kill me and Chaosmon, to do that little combo. So they wouldn't have been able to kill me. They would have decked out. I would have won the match, but that's on me, sour grapes. So round 3, we played against the Lord Knight. Nothing particularly special there. We just controlled the board and kind of kept control of the game, pace of the game. Round 4, we played against what's probably the worst matchup for this deck in Lilith Loop. Lilith Loop has the unfortunate benefit of whenever they play their level 7 Digimon, it comes with 2 level 5 Digimons, and those level 5 Digimons usually have 7k or more DP, which is really hard choke point for this deck. Trident Revolver is one of your only ways to double spell, even with your multiple mat ties, so not being able to kill anything with the Trident Revolver to then play another option to try and control the board and keep the pace of game in your favor is really rough. But then we got Redemption in the next round playing against Lilith Loop, where we kind of learned the strategies and took our time, made sure not to rush attacking security because we didn't have to attack security. We actually started on the deck out plan for that deck, because Lilith Loop needs to draw so many cards and go through so many resources, so as long as they're spending their time developing and you're spending your time recovering before they can get developed, you should end up winning that match, because they can go into Zwart all they want. If you're checking the Zwart and then the other guys are dying to security checks on their own, the match should just eventually work its way into your favor. You just gotta make them deck out, and they will, because they're Lilith Loop players. They will deck out. It's just bound to happen. Round 5, we played against Security Control Mirror Match, and it was unfortunate for them because they were playing the Blade of the True version, Blade of the Just, the yellow draw card, depending on if you have extra security or whatever. that card made him draw too many cards, and eventually we just got to a point where he was out of cards in his deck, and I still had 20 left in mine. So that happened game 1 and 2, and it was just one of those things where his deck was probably better suited against the meta, but it was bad in the mirror match, and we got rewarded for that one. We got our revenge on Green Note TK next. At that point, we eventually got to a point where we had a security stack of 10 plus security, which was nutso, and they just couldn't get through it, and eventually we won with Zwart. And then the last round, and this is really unfortunate for the last round people, and that's why we should really test when you're planning to play in an event. I played against a Lord Knight player who had no idea how to play against security control because he never played against it. He actually gave a tell really early in the start of game 1. He said something along the lines, "Wow, your deck's really neat. That must be really hard for people to play against," which just led me to believe that he had never played against it, so he didn't know how to play against it. And if you have not played against security control and don't know what you're supposed to do, you're going to be in for a rough time of just trying to check security and cross your fingers. So it got to the point where he didn't realize until about 25-30 minutes into the match, into game 1, that he was in a position where he just couldn't win. And I was in no position to concede because I was going to win. He got himself to 0 cards in his deck, spent some time thinking about it, eventually realized what he needed to do in game 2, made this really wide board that got punished by Ultimate Flare, and then ultimately lost because of time. He wasn't going to win the match anyway because the inexperienced piece, but he had the ability to at least cause a draw out of it if he had known better how to play against it, but he didn't. And that really goes to show that you should be testing for these events, especially when you got to play 9 hours worth of Digimon, and you don't want to go into your bubble match crossing your fingers that you can win against a deck you've never played against that has very good variance and odds. So we got luckily rewarded at the end of our tournament, ended up 6-1-1 for the day, which was good for 15th place out of 488 players. And we have our national invite, so we're going to be ready for that. If you'd like to see the gameplay for our event yesterday, please stay tuned to his YouTube channel. We'll have the edited VOD up here very shortly after this deck profile, but I wanted to get the deck profile out to you first, especially to ride that momentum after the event. It's going to be super cool. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing to my channel. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, maybe leave me a comment. We can talk about Digimon if you'd like. If you like what you see and hope that you get some more good content out of it, please consider following my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/bbcjg_. If you look up bbcjg, I'm the only thing that pops up, so it's pretty easy to find me. So if you enjoy that content, please come over. We're going to be playing Digimon a lot more often. We're going to be making YouTube content a lot more often. Thank you to Eggman again for hosting my channel yesterday with 86 viewers. That was insane. From me to you, thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.